Hello, welcome back to the course Beginning Laravel. In the previous section, diving into Laravel, we understood more about Laravel framework and we saw how to create a Laravel application and configure the Laravel application and configure the required web servers. In this section, all about Laravel MVC structure, we are going to take a look at working with Laravel roots, introduction to Laravel MVC structure, working with Laravel controllers, working with Laravel models, working with Laravel views and black templates, working with database and understand database migrations. In this video, working with Laravel roots, we are going to take a look at basics of Laravel routing, the default root files, different router methods, Csrf protection, understanding middlewares, and passing parameters in roots. First of all, let's understand basics of Laravel routing. Laravel routing feature is one of the coolest features of Laravel framework. In other PHP frameworks, routing is done by controller name and method names. But in Laravel, you can define root with any name and you can decide which controller and method will be invoked to handle that roots. You can define all the possible roots of your applications in various root files of the framework. We will see in details what are these root files and how to use them. Let's take a simple example of roots. Go back to your Laravel application and open a file from roots web.php. All the web roots are defined in this web.php file. Now we will see very simple example of some of the roots. So as you can see that in web.php there is already one root defined, which is root get / that means it's a default root of our Laravel application and it is returning the welcome view. Similarly, we can define our own root. So let's define a very simple root example. To save the time, I'm just copying the code. So I'm adding a new root, which is root get. The name of the root is test root and it just returned the string welcome to Laravel routing. Now if you copy this test root and go back to browser and run it, okay, as you can see here it shows the string which you are returning from that function. If you try any other root which is not defined in web.php, it will show you an error not found HTTP exceptions. So for example, instead of test root, I am writing root as ABCD, hit enter, and as you can see here, it shows not found HTTP exception because that root is not defined. So with the Laravel application, you can run only the roots which are defined in various root files. You cannot just type any of the root in the browser and try to load the Laravel application. For roots, it's not always necessary to define function in your root file. You can also define a controller and its method which will be invoked to execute that root. For example, let's use the test controller which we created in previous video and add a function in that, and for our test root, invoke a function inside a test controller. So I'm adding a function here which is public function. The name of the function is index and it is returning the same string which we are returning right now from the web.php file. Now modify our root and instead of function we will use test controller at index. So this is the syntax of specifying the name of the controller and name of the method of that particular controller which will be invoked when you are using that root in the browser. So let's just refresh it, and as you can see here, the same string is returned from the controller and the method which we have specified in a root invocation. You can also return the view instead of the string like we are doing in the welcome view. So if we can copy it and instead of string, return the view, save it, refresh, and the welcome view is returned. So this is how the basics of Laravel root works. We will see in more detail when we implement CRUD operations in upcoming video in your Laravel applications, where we will get more idea about Laravel roots. Next we will see default router methods which are used by Laravel. Next we will see default root files which are available in Laravel application. These are the default root files. We already saw web.php, second one is api.php, third one is console.php, and fourth one is channels.php. These all 4 files are available inside a root folder of your Laravel application. This is the API PHP, this is the channels PHP, this is the console PHP, and this is the web PHP. We already saw use of web.php file, and we just added a few roots inside it, and we configured controller and its method to be invoked while calling a root. The roots you define in api.php files are used for creating APIs for your Laravel application. APIs are required when you want to integrate your application with a third-party application. Here all your roots are stateless roots and are assigned to API middleware. We will see what are the middleware shortly in this video. The other 2 root files are used when you create custom commands and events with artisan command. So whenever you create a custom artisan command and whenever you fire a particular event, those event handlers and those artisan command output roots are defined in console.php and channels.php. Next we will see different router methods. These are the different router methods right now available in Laravel application. One is root get, we already saw that. Second one is root post. Third one is root patch. Fourth one is root put. Fifth one is root delete, and the last one is root options. We already saw use of get methods. We just created a few roots with the get method and just return some string and views from it. The other methods are standard REST methods. For example, method post is used when you have a form post. Others are the same standard HTTP methods. We will see them in more details when we implement CRUD operations in upcoming video, where we will use all this method to implement CRUD operations in your Laravel applications. You can define multiple root method for a single root. For example, here I am specifying root colon match get and post, and my root is defined as a main root of our Laravel application. So now this root can be executed with either get or post method. So you can have one root defined for multiple methods in your Laravel application. If it is required, you can do it with multiple methods. Next we will see Csrf protections. This is used to prevent your application from cross-site request forgery attacks. Csrf attacks are used to perform unauthorized commands on behalf of users. So to prevent that, it is compulsory to add Csrf token fields in your HTML forms of your Laravel application. Whenever you are using any HTML forms in your views, it is required to add Csrf token field, because Laravel framework will always check for Csrf token field for all the post requests. If it does not find any Csrf token, it will not allow that root to be executed, and it will throw an exception that invalid Csrf token. Now let's see a very simple example of this Csrf token. For that, we will create a very simple form in our views. So I am creating new view here with the name form.blad. So this is my form. Now let's add a root in web.php to show that form. So I'm adding a very simple root here, root get form, and in that I am just returning the form view which we have just created right now. Just copy that, go to the browser, open the form, and as you can see here, form is created. Now if you see our form HTML code, we have added action as a form submit, and method of the form is post method. So we also have to define our route to handle that. So I'm just creating a very simple route here, which is using post method, and action is form submit, and it is just showing the message that form is posted. Now let's try to post this form. Click on submit, and as you can see here, it gave you exception, that token mismatch exception, because we have not added any Csrf token field in our form. So this is how Laravel application is protecting your application from forgery attacks using Csrf. So now let's add Csrf field inside the form. To add a Csrf field in any of your Laravel blad, you just have to use this syntax, csrf underscore field. This is the function, and this is the directive which will be executed when your Laravel view is compiled into a PHP, and it will create a form field which is a hidden field, and it will set a random value inside that, and when the form is posted, it will pass that token field, and this time there will not be any error, as it found a token field in a post request, and it just showed the message form posted. So this is how Csrf protection work in your Laravel application. Now next, let's understand what is the middlewares. In Laravel, middleware provides the mechanism for filtering HTTP requests entering your applications. For example, there is a default auth middleware available whenever your Laravel application is created. It checks if user is authenticated or not before it can visit the particular route. So if you have a requirement that user cannot view certain routes without logging into the system, then you can use auth middleware. You can also define your own middleware and do the filtering as per your requirement in middleware created by you. So let's just create a very simple middleware. Go to the terminal, type the command php artisan make middleware. Name of the middleware will be check first name. Hit enter, and as you can see, it shows the message middleware created successfully. Now this middleware will be created in a app http middleware directory, and you can see the check firstname.php is created. Now this is the basic syntax of middleware class. The important function is for us is public function handle. This function will be executed before your Laravel route is executed if you have assigned this check first name middleware in any of the route, and it will check for the validations, and if it is validated, then it will allow you to proceed further, or else it will not allow you to proceed. So this is how you can filter any HTTP request which does not fulfill any requirement of your Laravel application. So in this case, let's just do a very simple check in the form we just have recently created, that first name should not be empty. So in handle method, add this condition. If in a request first name is blank, we redirect it to the main URL of our Laravel application. Otherwise, we will allow it to proceed and execute the route. Now to assign a middleware to a particular route, we have to modify the route definition. So in web.php, in a form submit, I am adding a check for middleware. So this is how you can add a check for middleware. Now let's again go back to the form. First of all, without entering first name and last name, I will try to submit a form. Okay, so as we have added middleware check over here, we also have to add check first name class namespace here. So we'll add it with the use directive on top of the web.php file. Alright, now let's go back to the form Just refresh it. Now without entering any value, I will just try to submit the form. So here, as you can see, since the first name was not entered, so instead of executing that route, it redirect us back to the home page of our Laravel application. And so this is how root is protected by the middleware. Now let's go back and add a value in first name, submit, and as you can see, since now first name was available, so it executed the route completely, and it saw the message form posted. So this is how you can add a middleware check in your routes, and middlewares are particularly used to filter any HTTP request of your Laravel applications. Next we will see how you can add params in your routes. So it is required that whenever you create a Laravel application, you may have to add certain params to your routes, which can be a dynamic params. So we will see some basic example of how you can add a params. Let's just add one more route here. It shows route get user, then this will be our dynamic param, which can be anything and which will be available as a argument to the function which we are using to handle the route. And we just can simply do here echo name is $name, and now you can use this as hit enter, and name is heroine. You can put anything over here, like you can put numeric word as well, 1 2 3 4 5 6, and it shows 1 2 3 4 5 6. Also you can add a regular expression pattern matching over here if you want your param to be certain things, like for example, if you have a requirement of a param that it should be only a numeric or it should be only a character, you can add a regular expression. So for example, let's add a regular expression so that our name param will always be a characters. So here I am adding regular expression that my name should be a mixture of character, either it should be capital letters or it should be small letters, but it should always be letters. So now let's go back and use it with 1 2 3 4 5 6 and execute, and it says not found HTTP exception because we just added a regular expression check that the param should be always a character. So instead of 1 2 3 4 5 6, if I add my name, it will be executed. Same way for the numbers, we have this param. So here we can just simply add user ID is ID. Now if we use this param, okay, sorry, let's add here only user ID is so now it will only work with the numeric character, and if I just add 1 here, it will work, but if I add a character, it will throw not found HTTP exceptions. This is how you can pass parameters to your Laravel applications routes. You can also pass multiple parameters. It is not required that the params should always be one. You can pass multiple params like this. Let's say /id /name, and all param will be available as a argument to the function, and we can use like name is. Now if we can go back and if we type 1/, it will work that user ID is 1 and name is Hiran. So you can have multiple params in your routes, and same way you can add multiple check for your route params. So this is the basics of Laravel routing. This is how the Laravel routes work, and we will see this in more detail when we create a CRUD application in upcoming videos.